Hey, what's up, guys? This is Carruthers, and welcome back to the Carrot Poker podcast. Apologies for the lapse in bringing out new episodes. I think there was like a whole week there where I didn't release a new episode for you guys. So I'm really sorry to anyone who subscribes on iTunes or YouTube and is patiently waiting for the next installment because they've eagerly watched every episode so far. I hope there are people like that. I like to think that guys like that exist, and people are getting emails right now being like, "Oh my god, the next episode of Carrot Poker is out." That's my dream. Maybe I'm not there yet, but hopefully as this podcast gets a bit more popular and people enjoy the way that I teach, I hope, then we can get there. But anyway, I'll try and do my best for you guys this episode. I have something exciting to teach you today, so that one day, I'll hopefully have a big audience. By the way, if you like the podcast, please leave me some feedback or reviews on iTunes or YouTube. It just really helps to get the podcast out there and to get other people listening and stuff like that. And I'd really appreciate to know what you think. Both positive and negative reviews welcome. If you have constructive criticism or things you like, things you want to see more of, that's cool. Let me know. Today's episode is all about something that's really been troubling me as a coach recently, actually. I've gotten to a point in my coaching where I think I'm teaching the off the tables theory part of the game really well. Like, I'm writing my book right now, and I've made all these nice figures and concepts and hand examples and database review and plugging people's leaks off the tables and stuff. I think I've been doing a lot of that. And what I perhaps neglected a few months back before I came to this realization recently is that I wasn't working enough with people with respect to their in-game thought process. And my students were reaching a level where they'd make very, very good decisions in hand history format and give very good advice for each other and would be very articulate and logical with their feedback for one another on my student forum. But at the same time, maybe their results weren't quite up to where they should be for some of them, or when we did live sweats, I realized that they weren't really able to emulate the same depth and clarity of decision making that they can off the tables. And the reason for this is just the natural disconnect between things that you're learning and things that you can actually apply in that small window that you have to make a decision in game, especially if you're playing fast tables or Zoom or whatnot, and you only have 10 seconds per street to make a decision if you don't have a time bank. So if you've used it all, stressing about what to do with the last hand, then you're going to be in a situation where it's quite difficult to apply the knowledge that you've gained and the understanding you've gained through coaching or learning on your own in any kind of way that's deep enough for you to make anywhere near the full potential of, good decision that you could make if you had more time. So what I've started doing recently is just making sure that I always dedicate enough time to bridging the gap between out-of-game thinking and in-game thinking. And this is just such a super important thing because, after all, at the end of the day, it's not out-of-game thinking. It's not being able to sit on a forum and give a very good essay response to someone that makes you money. That's something you do out of the kindness of your heart and to help your own game and their game, but it's not something that actually makes you dollars immediately. And we need to be able to get those dollars, or those EVs, I should say, expected value immediately, that's going to turn into dollars one day if we're going to make any money from this game. And to do that, we really need a good in-game thought process. So here are 5 steps that you can take to translate the stuff you are learning out of game into an in-game setting. Disclaimer before we get going, these steps won't help you have a really good in-game thought process if your out-of-game thought process is already flawed or shaky or just not developed enough, or maybe you've developed bad habits in it. So, you need to take out-of-game steps as well, like making sure you're not taking in too much information, working with community, working with other people, posting on forums, reviewing your own sessions, working with a coach, whatever it is that you think works for you and that you've researched should work for you. There's a lot of good ways and bad ways to learn out of game too, but my focus today is going to assume that you have a good out of game thought process, and it's going to be 5 steps to translate that into a very healthy in-game thought process. You're never going to reach the same level of competence in-game as you are going to be out of game. It's just not possible with the limited time and the pressure. But I want to lower the gap. I want to decrease the gap between those two thought processes and basically bring the in-game thought process closer to where the out-of-game thought process is, even if it's impossible to get the two of them on an even keel. So step number 1 for bridging this gap between out-of-game and in-game is a technique that my students are sick of me going on about called focus sessions. This is a technique I came up with, actually. I wrote an article about it on my blog about 6 months ago when I realized that people were just really not applying anything that they'd been taught because they hadn't decreased the amount of volume they were playing while they were learning. A focus session is, in essence, a session that you play where you reduce the amount of volume you're playing by at least 50%, often more. So if your usual volume is to 6 table, 6 max cash, you'd play like 2 or 3 tables maximum. If you're 4 tabling, you'd play 1 or 2 tables, depending on what you're comfortable with. The idea is that we increase your thinking time. You can think about every spot in depth, and it actually allows the incorporation of new material that you're learning out of game into the in-game setting, because your brain has all this free time to think suddenly, and you free up the time to actually use these new neural connections that you're forming out of game and these new ideas that are bouncing through your head, and you get time to actually apply them in the right way. Obviously, when you first learn a concept, it doesn't just mean that you're able to apply it instantly. So this is a way of bridging the gap with these focus sessions. So let me give you an example of how the learning model goes without focus sessions and then with focus sessions. So if you never play focus sessions and you're basically testing your volume to the maximum all the time and playing like 8 tables or 4 tables of Zoom or something like that at the same time, then you're going to take a concept, say you're learning how to build good polar 3-bet ranges against regs who fall too much in your player pool. In that spot, you might just really half-heartedly only be able to think about the situation. Like, you've got 3 decisions to be made at once. 2 of them are spots that you might have a polar 3-bet range, and you just don't even have time to think about what your range should look like, let alone whether the hand in front of you falls into it. So you end up just thinking like one random thought from what you were taught last coaching session, which is just like one thing that may or may not be the full story. It may lead you to the wrong decision, and then you go from there. Then, okay, you think about it out of game later, you tag it for review, but the problem is that your brain's not had that in-game reinforcement. You've not been able to create those in-game fast neural pathways to apply the material that you learned on Polo 3-betting. The student B, who does do focus sessions, is only playing like 1 or 2 tables now, and a spot comes up where he's got a full time bank and he's able to actually sit down and say, right, well, this is a spot in which I think I want a polar range because my opponent folds a lot, and I think that I would be calling most of the hands better than this one, so this one's too weak to call, but only just, therefore it's definitely going to fit into my range as a 3-bet bluff. And that thought there, that took like sort of 10-15 seconds. It might be slower for student B in question because he's just learned this technique, whereas I've been familiar with it for years. So even if it takes him like 25 seconds to formulate that thought, that's something he wouldn't have been able to do if he were not playing a focus session. And I don't say that my students should only play focus sessions when they're learning new material, which they always are. They shouldn't. They should play volume sessions too, because getting results is important, and moving up in the stakes is what we're here for, right? So we do need to get volume in order to realize a win rate. That's really core and essential to poker, is playing high enough volume that you can actually progress. But at the same time, you need to balance that with incorporating new material in a practical sense and improving your in-game thought process and implementing the stuff you're learning when you have time to bridge that gap and create the bridge between out of game sort of slow casual thinking and in-game fast pressurized thinking. You need to do something in between. So you can't leap from out of game unlimited time to in-game playing 6 tables, high volume session, only got 10 seconds. You need something in between, and that's where the focus session actually comes in, where you have more time to think, but you are still in-game. The second technique I want to talk about today is speed review, and this is something you do with hand history review. After your session, like, everyone should review their hands at some point. The hands that fit the areas they're working on in their game right now is what I get my students to do, but also hands that they're most puzzled about, that represent spots that come up either most frequently or have the biggest impact on their bottom line, on their EV. So they need to review these hands after the session. And normally there's a gap created here as well between in-game and out-of-game, because the student picks 5 hands to look at from the session, very good, chooses them well, but then spends 15 minutes on each and spends like a whole hour and a bit reviewing. And the problem is that while that is useful and you should spend time doing lengthy reviews as well, you need to improve your out-of-game understanding, it doesn't help with the in-game thought process. If you spend 15 minutes getting to understand the spot really well, okay, it'll help you a bit the next time that spot comes up, but you've not created that thought pattern in your head that you can actually apply in the 15 seconds you've got in-game. So what speed reviews are is a way of speeding up your hand history review. Pick 10 hands, 10 minutes, go. 1 minute per hand. That way you get more detail than you would go through in-game, so you are bridging the gap, but you get way less detail than a casual, at your own speed, at your own pace review would give you. So again, you're choosing something in between improving your in-game thought process is all about doing study time or doing in-game or out-of-game thinking that is in between a volume session for you, which is your normal volume, and out-of-game learning the theory in the first place, something in between to bridge the gap. So speed review is good for that because it makes you think in an in-game way solely because of the time pressure, but at the same time you don't have the monetary pressure clouding your thought process, and you don't have 15 seconds, you've got a minute for each one instead. So you're definitely in much better shape there. You're bridging the gap. Then you can get to the point where you do 30-second reviews, 20-second reviews. You can really start to speed it up and just see how quickly you can get your brain ticking in-game. Like the poker brain is like a muscle, and you have to develop its in-game part as well as its out-of-game part. It's like if you're some kind of runner that does, I don't know, you're like an 800 meters runner, you need to be like pretty good at actually endurance running because you are running like almost a kilometer, but at the same time you need to be good at like sprinting and picking up the pace for the last like 200 meters or whatnot. It's the same kind of thing in poker. Like you need the out-of-game muscle to improve your overall understanding, then you need the in-game muscle to apply it. So don't neglect one or the other. Make sure you work on both, and that's what these 5 techniques are for. Technique number 3 is community sweats, and that just involves doing a sweat with someone that's of a reasonable level to yourself, preferably someone who's a bit worse or a bit better than you, someone you can bounce off ideas off of, who will understand your thought process or even learn a bit from your thought process or vice versa, who won't be miles ahead of you dictating stuff you don't understand to you in game, but the two of you understand each other to such an extent that you can bounce ideas quickly and get through to each other quickly. There's no gap between the level of your ability and your sweat partner's level of ability. No big gap anyway. You're both able to connect in game and articulate what you're thinking. Because when you're talking to someone else or you're communicating and interacting with someone else, humans are social beasts. So we do a lot better learning in a social environment. It's like I was actually just talking to my friend on the phone earlier, and he was telling me how in his job right now, he's having to teach this horrible thing about mental health. Like he works as a carer. It's kind of off topic, but he's having to teach this course to newer members of staff, and literally the course is like a distance learning preset course, and it involves just copying out sheets of facts about mental health and then submitting them. Like this is ridiculous. Like it's like the worst way of learning I've ever heard of. And one reason it's so bad is because it's not social in any way. It involves no interaction or stimulation. Like when you teach English or you learn how to do that and you do a course on it, one of the first things they teach you is that you have to engage and stimulate your students, and that's why you do activities, that's why you create social tasks, and that's why you always have a lot of communication. Okay, that's a language, but the same is true in poker as well. Communication helps us learn, so sweats are really good. They get the brain juices flowing, if you like, and sort of get the brain sort of ticking over a bit faster, stimulates it, and that in turn leads to more energized thinking, which is what you need when you're in a pressure environment. That's what your in-game thought process needs. It needs energized thinking, cramming more thoughts into a short space of time under monetary pressure as well. Play live sessions, speak to someone around your level, constantly make sure there's no silence, make sure you're always talking about what you're thinking and responding to their feedback. And that goes a hell of a long way. Like I encourage my students to do this all the time, and they arrange sweats on the community to do that kind of thing. They don't do it enough. They should definitely do it much more. Number 4 is commentary videos. Just because you're not a poker coach or instructor doesn't mean you can't record a video of your play. Back when I was like pretty bad at poker in like 2007, I had this like handheld microphone because I was such a fish. Then in every aspect of life, I was just like a young fish that had no idea what he was doing. I didn't even have a headset. I just had this like handheld mic that I would hold in one hand and then control the keyboard and the mouse simultaneously with the other hand. And I would like talk about what I was doing as if I was like some kind of baller, like trying to educate a non-existent audience. I guess I always wanted to be a poker coach, even when I wasn't good enough to be. And that really helped me progress actually, because just speaking and articulating my thoughts, I've always been quite articulate, if I do say so myself, kind of thing. And so it really helped me to be able to like put that into effect and talk about what I was doing. And I was making loads of mistakes. I was playing really badly and I was articulating wrong thought processes, but that's not the point. I was still articulating. I was getting my mind used to speeding up, thinking faster, and being able to talk and think at the same time. I'll do sweats with students sometimes and this is called like a ghosting sweat, where I'll be watching them play. And then I'll say to them, you have to tell me why you're doing everything you're doing, and only then am I going to give you feedback. And honestly, some of them, they'll only be able to muster like 5 words for a really complex spot because they have to simplify the thought process that much. And that illustrates the gap between their in-game play and their out-of-game understanding, because I know for a fact if I gave that same student a problem to solve out of game, they would give me a big essay about why heroes should do all the right things. So the point is that they've not practiced speaking and thinking at the same time, so their brain is still working in a slow mode where it's not reacting quick enough, its reflexes aren't good enough. So commenting on your own play and actually posting the videos of you commenting for a review helps twofold, because it helps your in-game thought process because your brain's speeding up to talk and play at the same time, and it also helps your out-of-game thought process because then you're going to get feedback from your poker peers on your play or your coach and get advice on that. So definitely an awesome thing to do, commentary videos. Last but not least on this list is Energized dialogue. Now this is like an extension of commentary videos. You don't always have to record every session. That would get a bit monotonous and mundane. I'm not saying you should, but in every session you should make sure there's an inner dialogue going on in your head. One thing I used to do as well back in the day is actually talk out loud to myself. When I was really pumped up and really like enthusiastic about poker, I would actually be in my bedroom, like in my flat, muttering to myself about what I should do, like villain's range is like this, so I should probably do this, this and this. And my flatmates probably thought I was insane. Just spouting all this jargon that if you're not a poker player, you're just going to hear ramblings about a linear, wide 4-bet, cold 4-bet defense range, and you're just going to be like, this guy's a psychopath, he's just insane. But anyway, I would be muttering this stuff. You don't have to do it out loud, but make sure that there's an energized dialogue going on, that at no point do you find yourself just zoning out thinking about what you're going to do later on that evening and clicking a button, or at no point let an emotion dictate your play. Oh, I really don't want to lose this pot, so I'm going to have to just call, or something like that. That's like an emotional response. If the inner logical dialogue is just like blasting away at all times, like not only are you going to make better decisions because you're forcing your brain to think quickly and have better reflexes, but at the same time you're going to avoid doing things for non-logical reasons, because that dialogue is it's hard to have a constant energized logical dialogue going on in your head and at the same time be really emotional and be acting out of emotional reasons. It's difficult to do that. So it actually controls tilt as well. It objectifies things and it makes you play better, both in terms of your mental game and your technical in-game play. It's going to be much better. So those are 5 steps that you can take. There are definitely more things you can do to improve, to bridge the gap between your out-of-game thinking and your in-game thinking. And for me personally as a coach, one thing I've been doing more recently, in recent months, is that I've been doing different sessions with my students, speed review sessions, commentary sessions where they play and talk to me really quickly, making them have the energized dialogue all the time, like that kind of thing, and it's been helping a lot. So I definitely recommend that. Well, people say like there's a balance between study and play, and you need to make sure you study a lot out of game. One big pitfall in poker is studying too much and not actually bridging the gap between what you're learning and how you're applying it. Hopefully these steps help you. Like I say, if you've got any feedback from me on my podcast, I'd love to hear some. I've churned out like 14 or 15 now, and I've not had that much feedback, so I'd love to hear how they're going down. And if you want to get in touch with me for poker coaching, I'm still doing private coaching packages. Check out my website at carrotcorner.com, and you can see all the packages listed there. You can email me, get hold of me for any questions. If you want to set up a little Skype chat with me there, then just to tell you, like demo my coaching methods and show you my student community and all that kind of thing, then email me at admin@carrotcorner.com, and I'd love to hear from you guys. I will see you on the next podcast, which I don't know what it will be yet, but I will definitely get them churned out every week from now on, so there's not like a big 2-week gap. I was on a holiday in Amsterdam, and when you're in Amsterdam, like you can't really be making poker podcasts because frankly there's just funner things to do in that city than make poker podcasts, and probably I wasn't in the mental condition to be making poker podcasts then either. But no Amsterdam trips planned for the next week, sadly, so lots more podcasts coming your way. Get in touch with me, love to hear from you guys, and run good at the tables. Until next time, this has been Characters, and good luck.